Okay, students, this should be a very straightforward, easy video. This is on regions. You've seen regions already. They're really just an IDE thing, an integrated development environment editor thing to help you organize your code. So it's something that you would have in Visual Studio in particular. You've already seen it in one place because I've been over here in this form we're not supposed to go into. I mean, again, it's a good idea to stay away from it as much as possible, but it's not like you can't ever go in. There, you'll have reasons sometimes. But if you notice, there's a built-in region for this called Windows Form Designer Generated Code. And what regions are, it's code folding is another way of referring to this in a general sense. They're called regions in Visual Studio, but like Java will have code folding and other IDEs have code folding. And that's when you have this plus and minus thing. You can click on the collapse. I did it a little bit in the last video when I was showing you the general design of the form. I really like to collapse everything. As a matter of fact, there's probably somewhere to collapse all. I can never remember where. I guess you could always do that, but when I'm working with a program, especially when it's a class, I like to collapse things down towards all plus signs here as much as possible, so I can see all the parts with a bird's eye view, synoptic, in other words. But you'll notice this one's already been collapsed. And why is it collapsed? I mean, it's some kinds of boards that you read on the internet have this too. They'll put it in spoilers, right? When you have a bunch of junk that you might want to look at, but you don't want it to affect the overall structure of your post because it's so much stuff. That's what's going on here. There's so much stuff potentially on a form, especially if you add more to it. This one that I did doesn't have a whole lot, but you notice for each control, there's a lot of things that get set about where it's located, how big it is, what its tab index is, etc., etc. This all gets automatically generated and added. So with a form that has a lot of stuff on it, this is going to be a big region of stuff that you kind of sometimes might be just scrolling by. You want to get by it fast to get to some other part. So what do? You fold it all up into a region. So you notice what you see here is how you would do it manually yourself. You type hash region, and then you just notice you don't have to put quotes or anything. You just put the text you want to kind of like name the region. And then everything between that region and the delimiter on the other side, which is end region. It's kind of Visual Basic style in a way. Or shell scripting maybe. Everything between those two things can be collapsed in the IDE. And again, this is really just an IDE editor thing. It's not something about your C# code itself. So I've got one over here that I added. This is just a silly one. Let me actually undo it and get back to where I was. So just a demo region, how you would use it. And again, the example I just showed you is a better example because this is a silly demo example. So to start it off, you would type, and you notice that your snippets thing comes up, which is, I haven't talked about snippets yet. I hardly ever use them, to be honest, and that's why I'm kind of putting it to the end. But it's in there. So you type region and you hit tab, that'll complete it and select it for you. And then you put whatever here, though it really should describe the region in some succinct. It should be succinct, but it should also be informative enough. So I think the one that you had, the Windows auto-generated code, whatever, it was one line, right? And it described accurately what that region was for. And you'd have now what has to kind of think of these as comments. Actually, they're ignored by the compiler, but so they do. It has to be proper code in here. This is not a comment inside of the region. Inside the region, you have code. So if you just want to put comments, you have to make them comments, right? Yeah, hold on. This is not a good place actually to put a region, because as an example, because it's not actually in the class. So I was going to do some more examples in it. So here's an example. Let's do this. Let me just start over. I want to do region dice example, and then I'm going to end region. if for some reason I just wanted to leave this code in and not delete it like it probably should be, I would do that, right? So it's just a way to organize your code and be able to reduce the cognitive load on yourself when you have other tasks to look at. You're like, oh, that's just a DOS example. I can ignore it. I don't even have to see it. That's what regions are for. I think that really just covers it. There's some code folding that's not called regions, right? By default, this is kind of two very closely related but different things in the lesson objectives, right? Other blocks in your code will have automatic code folding enabled, and you can manipulate this. I hardly ever do. There's ways to manipulate this outside a region. I just take what's there because that's usually how you want to do it anyway. So if you notice, you can collapse the whole class. You can collapse the parts of the class, like you can collapse the constructor if you want, or each method, etc., etc. Inside the methods, you can collapse if structures, like this one, right? So that's what the code folding plus the region. Again, they're two different things that are very closely related. Regions can create code folding sections, and then there's code folding that you just have for typical blocks in a C# structure. I'll see you in the next one. That was fairly short.